Hello and welcome to another edition of It's Your City. I'm Bob Crowell and I have the honor and privilege of being the mayor of the greatest city in Nevada, our very own Nevada's capital, Carson City. As you know, every couple of weeks I give a little rundown of what happened at the last board meeting and some other things going on around Carson City. So let me start off on what happened at our last board meeting. Actually, since my last discussion, we've had a couple board meetings. About a week and a half ago, when you see this, we had a strategic retreat at the sheriff's office in the Orangey Room, where we had all the board members and some members of the public that were there that attended, as it was an open meeting, and all our department heads, where we had kind of a free-flow discussion on the goals and objectives of Carson City and how we intended to meet those, and just get kind of a feeling for where a lot of things were in our community. So that was a meeting that lasted about 4 hours. It was a good meeting, and we have a lot of things to think about coming out of that meeting. We'll be having more of those as we go on. I think that one of the things that came out of that was that we're going to try and do more town hall style meetings maybe in different areas of the city. As we go forward, either do that by ward or some geographical distinction, but we're going to try and do that. We haven't completely put the pieces together about how they're going to be structured, but I think you can anticipate seeing some more meetings like that in a kind of a town hall format as we go forward. And this last week, we had a long board meeting. It lasted all day, as a matter of fact. And there were a number of things on the agenda, and I'll talk about some, and if you want to know about others, please feel free to give me a call or an email, or probably a call is better, at the Carson City offices at 887-2100, and that'll get through to me. Let me just say that one of the things we started off with was giving some direction to our internal auditor, who's Moss Adams, to comply with the board accepted the recommendation of our audit committee that we have our internal auditor look at two areas in our community for efficiency issues. One was a fleet management study, and two is to analyze whether we should implement or how we would implement a fraud, waste, and abuse hotline. Those were two items that were recommended by the audit committee, and the board agreed to have our internal auditor look and give recommendations back to the board on what they found on our fleet management issues, and also how we might develop and implement a fraud, waste, and abuse hotline in our community. As you know, or maybe I've said on prior meetings, our charter for Carson City requires that we have an internal auditor, and we have hired Moss Adams as they're not an employee, obviously, to be our contract internal auditor. And so we look forward to seeing what Moss Adams comes back with on those two studies. And it looks like those are good areas that the audit committee suggested, and so I look forward to seeing what comes back from Moss Adams on that. Also, on that agenda, we talked about dissolving or withdrawing from the Sierra Forest Fire Protection District. That serves the western side of our community. I've talked about that before on this program, but right now on the west side of Carson City, 10 cents per every 100 of your real property tax bill goes to funding the Sierra Forest Fire Protection District on the west side of our community. The board has agreed or took the steps to dissolve that district, remove the 10-cent levy on your property tax, and that then Carson City would take over all those duties. And we believe that we can do that. As a matter of fact, that's the proposal, that one, we're going to reduce the property tax rate on the west side by 10 cents per $100 of assessed value, which will make the assessed value rate or levy throughout the city uniform. But we can do that without incurring any additional costs other than what we currently incur for our part of providing fire protection in that area. At the same time, we will be able, for the same amount of money, we will be able to use, through a cooperative agreement with the state, use certain of the state firefighting equipment in the event we need it, and we have an agreement in place that says, you know, how much we will be charged for that. But our current estimate is it will be charged no more than what we've been paying in the past, and so that's a good deal. And I like to look at that as efficiency in government, where we can create efficiencies and reduce our tax levy. That's always a good thing to do. So my hat's off to the fire chief, Stacy Giomi, for pursuing this issue, and hopefully, and I know it will, it'll work just fine. So let me also say that, and it's a good thing that the levy throughout the city is going to be uniform. Another thing that we did during our board meeting was come up with a resolution giving some direction on how the city would handle issues coming before the legislature. As many of you know, there are probably going to be about 1,200 bills introduced in the legislature. Some of those bills, in fact, it turns out to be quite a number as the legislature goes on, will affect local government in some fashion. And that's because local governments exist at the pleasure, it's kind of an odd way of saying it, but they exist because the state gives them the right to exist. So when the legislature meets, there are a lot of things that the legislature wants to see done that affect local communities, or a lot of discussion about, you know, what's going on in local communities at the legislative level. And there are a number of those issues that come before the legislature that are what I call operational in nature. They deal with, you know, how we're going to handle street repairs, handle public safety issues and things of that nature, which we kind of know what the city position is on those. We want to make sure that we weigh in to one, protect what we have, and two, to make sure that we are gaining every efficiency we can from the legislature to allow us to perform our duties easier and in a more cost-effective manner. And those issues are relatively easy for us to address at the legislature. On the other side of the coin, there are issues that are large issues, or what I call policy issues, where the Board of Supervisors should be take them up and have an actual vote as to whether or not it's a policy that the board wants to support or not support. Sometimes that line is a little bit difficult to draw between what's an operational issue and what's a policy issue. But regardless, there is a distinction. And so the resolution that the board passed this past agenda meeting was an attempt to say that the city manager, as the chief executive officer of the city, can direct his staff with respect to testimony or positions before the legislature on theoretically operational needs. But if it was a policy issue, that the issue of support or opposition to any particular bill at the legislature rising to that level should be brought before the Board of Supervisors for board vote and board discussion and board vote. The distinction would be, the first line of distinction is the city manager would have to decide what issues would be operational and which would be policy, and that it is not an easy one either sometimes, because, as I said, sometimes the line between policy and operational is not easy to draw. But we tried to draw into the resolution a way where the city manager could get a sense to double check his thought on whether, you know, which particular box any particular legislation fell in. So I'm glad to see that this issue hopefully is resolved. It is a work in progress. We're going to see how it operates, and with the idea that, you know, we want our citizens to know what it is that your Board of Supervisors as an entity is, what positions they are taking before the legislature as much as possible. So we'll be watching how that happens over the next over the remainder of this legislative session, which is probably, you know, ends on June 4th or thereabouts. as I said, there are just a lot of bills, and so far I think that as of the taping of this, there have been maybe 500 bills issued, and there are probably another 700 that are in the hopper out there. So it is physically impossible for the board to meet on every bill that comes before the legislature, although, you know, in one sense that might be technically a good thing to do. It's just physically impossible to do in order to stay ahead of or stay up with the workings of the legislature in a 120-day time frame. We also spent time in the afternoon talking about community support grants and community block development grants. Those are grants that come from the federal government to us as a community, and we do this every year. The amounts have been declining. The amount of grant money has been declining, so we allocated those funds to the various organizations that apply. We have an application process that's set up to review applications to apply for those grant funds that we were given. At the end of the day, well, let me just back up a minute there. In order to help the board and the applicants go through this process, the board asked that our planning folks create a citizens working group, an application review work group this year, and last year it was chaired by the Chamber Executive Director, Ronnie Hanneman, to go through each of the applications on not only the block grants, but the community support grants, to give us a cut on how the priority of those grants, how that money should be allocated among the various applicants. In a nutshell, after hearing from everyone, the board essentially adopted the recommendations of that application working group, and I want to say thanks to that working group for its efforts on this. As you probably heard me say at board meetings, or maybe you haven't, two of the most difficult issues that we come up with a lot of difficult issues, but two of the more difficult ones are appointments of citizens to our advisory committees and the allocation of funds to the various volunteer organizations that we have in our community. Those are difficult decisions for the board. We have a lot of volunteer organizations that do just some wonderful things, and I think that if anything, yesterday when we heard from all of them, and I thought it was important for each of them to come and talk on camera and talk to the board and talk to the public about what they do for our community and spend some time talking about that. Because sometimes I think that we can, overlook the good things and the necessity of doing those good things that all of our volunteer organizations do. And so I'm very proud of what those organizations do. We couldn't, as a community, maintain the quality of life for all of us, and I emphasize for all of us, without the work that those entities do. So again, my hat's off to all those volunteer organizations for the work that you do, and my hat's off to the application work group for its efforts in helping the board make these rather difficult decisions. And while we talk about difficult decisions, the other difficult decision of the day was appointing a member to fill an unexpired term of a member who left the Parks and Recreation Commission. We had 5 applicants who were extremely talented applicants, and as I mentioned at the end of the day, all 5 of those applicants were people that I am proud to be a resident with. They all want to see Carson City move forward. They all want to see Carson City do the best it can, and Parks and Recreation is a big, big part of the quality of life we enjoy in our community. And so at the end of that, the board picked Mr. Colburn, Jason Colburn, to fill that spot. He comes from the current incoming class of the leadership class put on by the Chamber of Commerce, and we look forward to his participation on the Parks and Recreation Committee. But I want to reiterate that all 5 applicants were extremely well qualified, extremely good citizens of our community, and I appreciate and thank them for their willingness to help make the decisions, help all of us make those decisions that benefit our community. Let me close a little bit here today by talking about the wild horse issue. It's been on the news a little bit. As you know, there's been a wild horse herd in the Pinion Hill area of our community for many, many years. Wild horses, those are under the jurisdiction of the Bureau of Land Management. They are the ones who have, for lack of a better word, the control and the management of the wild horses on BLM property in Nevada. And those horses in particular that are out in the Pinion Hill area of Carson City. The BLM stated that they've received a number of safety complaints with respect to horses, particularly horses going into the public park area and also crossing the road at Deer Run Road. And therefore they thought in their wisdom that in order to take care of those safety concerns, they were going to round up the herd and put the herd up for adoption along with other wild horses that they were rounding up. A number of our citizens have presented, not just to me, but to the BLM, plans where there may be a way to keep that herd intact because for its heritage in the area. And the plans included, helping do some fencing there to keep the horses out of the public area where they might cause safety concerns, helping build water facilities in the hill area where horses didn't need to go down to the river to get water, helping to develop more signage and more awareness that we shouldn't be feeding the wild animals, or the wild animals in general, it's true, but the horses in particular in this case, and also to put additional signage up on Deer Run Road to alert people that there may be wild horses in that area. I took the opportunity to sit down with BLM along with other members of our staff to see if we could work through any of those issues where we could have community and the community and city involvement to help assist the BLM in solving the safety concerns so that the horses could stay there, and we could also rest assured that those who thought that there was a safety issue could also rest assured. At the end of the day, in a nutshell, the Bureau of Land Management stated that the only way that they thought that could be done would be to transfer the liability for herd management to Carson City. That's something that is difficult for us to do. I mean, one, because we have no expertise in our community with respect to wild horses, and it is kind of outside of our normal operations, and so it is difficult, if not impossible, for us to accept liability in the manner in which, well, difficult to accept liability because at the end of the day, and I say that a lot, what the BLM said is what that means is that the horses will be put up for adoption. The city, as a city, would then adopt those horses, and then we would put them on some form of city-owned land and manage them. Because this came down all in a short period of time, it's difficult for the board to take affirmative steps either for or against just because of the timing. But at the end of the day, I mentioned at the strategic retreat that was where, I didn't think in my mind that we had the wherewithal to accept that type of liability. And I think that, during the retreat, it's probably everybody understands, all of our community residents understand that that's not a possibility either. So where does that leave us? I mean, at the end of the day, the Bureau of Land Management has jurisdiction over the issue. They have rounded up the horses. To the extent the city can help in this issue, I think the city would like to do that. I mean, I certainly would myself, but and I'll just say it point blank, I don't think that the city can walk into the issue of taking on liability or for horse management. One, for what I said, we have no expertise in that area, and two, I'm not certain. There's a lot of things that go into that. And so while it's something, we'll definitely be considering down the road or thinking about down the road, that's kind of where it stands now. But I applaud the local groups who have spent a lot of time developing plans to present to the Bureau of Land Management in a way where, we could, as a community, one, protect our citizens, two, protect the horses, and three, kind of keep life as we know it out there. I just think it's wonderful that we have some great people who have come up with some great plans. We'll see where it goes, but for right now, I don't know exactly what the city can do, but we're going to be thinking about it. And so, again, my hat's off to all of you out there who have worked on this issue. I've probably said a whole lot today that maybe I'll talk too fast, haven't smiled enough, but let me conclude by saying what the last board meeting told me, and what my work with the residents out on the Deer Run Road areas told me, and what I've learned from our other Board of Supervisors during our strategic retreat, is that we have a great community. We have a great community because our biggest asset in our community are our citizens. And we need to remember that, and we need to remember to pat ourselves on the back. It's through involvement that we help all of us move forward to protect our quality of life and to promote our quality of life. So as I usually do, and I want to do, and you can expect me to do every time you hear me talk, is I want to thank each and every one of you for what you do to make our community a better place to live, work, and play. Carson City is a wonderful place to live. I'm extremely proud to live here. On behalf of the Office of Mayor, thank you again for allowing me to spend a few minutes of time on Access TV. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to give me a call at City Hall or shoot me an email. I prefer phone calls, so thank you again, and we'll see you in a couple weeks.